Welcome, everybody, to the AI Powered Women podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Felicia Newhouse, and founder of the AI Powered Women Conference at MIT. This is where women leaders come to navigate human centered AI with clarity, with purpose, and with care. And each week we bring together diverse voices you won't find on a typical tech podcast, exploring how to integrate AI into your work without losing yourself in the process. You'll gain practical skills, fresh perspectives, and a deeper understanding of how to shape technology responsibly so it advances creativity, connection, and collective well being. And today we have Lori Mazor here on our podcast. She's also going to be one of our speakers at the AI Powered Women Conference. So, welcome, Lori. We're excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Hey. So, today's conversation, we wanted to explore your background a bit, and you're founder and CEO of Synthetivity. Am I saying that right? Synthetivity.
Synthetivity, synthesis, and creativity.
Love it. Okay. And as an industry leading AI educator and author of Temperature, Creativity in the Age of AI, and creator of the I Teach AI with a Human Touch philosophy, you've worked at the intersection of emerging technology, creativity, and leadership for decades, helping leaders integrate AI in deeply human centered ways. So, Lori, can you give us a little bit more about your journey and kind of what led you here and the work you're doing today?
Yeah, honestly, it was all about timing. I just happened to be at a point in my career. I had been an architect, I'd been in university administration, I'd been in building operations, things that it had a very linear trajectory
Yeah.
through 2022. And the pandemic kind of put a shockwave through everyone's system and certainly mine. I was really grateful to have a job where I was responsible for taking care of people during that process, but it was
Yeah.
also extremely exhausting. And so I took a career break and I just kind of gave myself space and time to figure out what was going to come next without really any idea. And I vacationed and I did lots of things. And it just happened that this was also the moment when AI was starting to percolate up to everyday people. And so I found Midjourney, which is an AI application for creating images. And through that, I found this amazing community of artists. And at this point in my career, I hadn't been making anything in a really long time. So the idea that you could do it with words, right? That these skills that we had developed as executive women could be used to make things that were artistic was really exciting to me. And I just dove deep like I do in a lot of things.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so you've really it sounds like, you've really built a career at the intersection of all these different areas where, people think about technology and leadership, but they don't necessarily think about kind of creativity and a human touch and human centeredness. That's less talked about. So in your view, what uniquely human qualities become more valuable, you think, in the AI era, not less? Like, you teach AI with a human touch, but what does that look like in practice, and why do you think it's really essential right
Yeah,
now?
I mean, the reality of what it looks like in practice is really just a mindset shift of thinking about where we as humans both have value, but also derive value from the productive work that we do.
Yeah.
So, work is supposed to be joyful and it's supposed to contribute to our collective well being. And so, when I work with companies, it always starts with education because
Yeah.
this is new to everybody, and everyone needs to have a set of skills where they understand what's possible with the technology, what's not possible, what the risks are, right? And they're sober about it. And from
Yeah.
there, we can say, okay, now that you know what it can do, what are the things that are most important to you and your company that you want to make sure humans are doing? Right? And then, we've been able to automate for decades now, but a lot of companies haven't automated. And simple things like, I was talking with a colleague of mine in Germany. We don't have one place where all our medical records are, right?
Yeah.
That's not AI.
Cool thing.
Right? Right? So what is the friction? What are the reasons that are standing behind why we aren't doing things we're capable of doing? Right? And then
Yeah.
there's this like interesting middle in between where AI is a conversation partner, it's a teammate, it's a reflection of you, right? It's many, many different things. It's a super processor of language. And so, where in that we want to find those AI opportunities. And so that's really what I do. And that's why I just say it's human centric, because this should all be about how technology serves us as human beings.
Yeah, and you're saying that like reflection piece. It's and I've seen you write too in your newsletter, which anybody here who's listening should check out. And you've written about AI as a mirror,
Yeah.
at showing us that our ingenuity, but also our biases and blind spots, and that leaders can work with that mirror responsibly. So yeah, it's interesting. If AI can help us see ourselves more clearly, I mean, what do you think are the uncomfortable truths that might it reveal about leadership and culture and about ourselves? Because there's kind of this whole, at least how I see it too, and I know others are talking about this at the conference coming up too, is just this idea of how we have an opportunity to step into a better paradigm of as leaders, as humans. We have an opportunity to be better, to do better, to have more accountability and more self-awareness. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about kind of how you see AI playing that role as a mirror.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way I see it, and I think we first saw it when AI first came out, when large language models first came out, and everybody was looking at ChatGPT or looking at image generators and saying like, "Wow, like that's trained on the internet, and we don't look so good." Right?
Yeah.
Raw out of the box, it was a way of seeing, and a lot of people would say, AI is biased. It's no, human beings are biased. Human
Yeah.
beings are biased. We've, not necessarily put the best high quality output out for the general public. We lie to ourselves, we lie to each
Mhm.
other, right?
Mhm.
And so, when you take training data, that's a combination of all of those things, like you kind of get ourselves back. And I think
Yep.
it was a moment to look at ourselves and to say, rather than placing blame, we're not going to place blame on technology. Let's take a look at it and say, okay, if we were to do this again, right? Let's like run the 2.0 version. Uh, how would it look differently? Right? What things would we change there? And I think that's what a mirror does, right? A mirror allows you to look at yourself and see yourself from the outside, right? And it's a lot easier to see something from the outside. We also often see the faults in other people before we see them in ourselves, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So
So, I think it's a great way of just externalizing a lot of the things that, either are conversations inside our head that just, play ping pong inside, or conversations that we really should be having in the general public.
yeah, amen to that. Man, if this can help us be better humans and can help the whole collective, I mean, let's hope that's the trajectory this all goes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, I was just listening to a podcast with Brian Cox, who talks about physics, and he's kind of like, the same aspect of humanity that's gives us the ability to launch ourselves into space and to find potentially extraterrestrial beings is
Yeah.
also the one that's going to kill us with nuclear power,
Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
the question is like, which direction are we going to go in, right? We're pretty
Yeah,
incredible beings. Like, are we going to use it for good and fly away, or are we going to destroy ourselves?
exactly. That's what tools do.
Yep.
They can help or they can hurt. So it's going to be an interesting journey for sure. We're all alive right now at a very interesting moment in history. So, and things are moving so fast. The amount we're going to witness in our lifetimes,
Yeah.
even just over the next decade is going to be mind blowing.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
really an incredible time to watch all this unfold
Yeah.
and be part of the shaping of that trajectory too,
Yes.
which is why these conversations and the conference coming up at MIT next month and all of these various communities are so important.
Yeah.
And that brings me to a question too around gender, because the conference, obviously, it's AI powered woman is the name of this conference,
Yeah.
and we are focusing on women. Men are invited too,
Yeah.
but we are putting women on stage. We're highlighting women. We're highlighting women's unique contributions, their unique challenges that they're facing with AI. So I'd love to hear a little bit of your perspective around just the patterns you see in how women approach AI adoption differently from men,
Yeah.
and how we can harness that difference for better outcomes, because right now the trajectory is not looking so great for women.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, look, we certainly have had our challenges. And I think that, if I flip it and I say, what are the assets of being a woman? I think part of it is that we've given ourselves permission to be feminine, right? And so I would like distinguish between feminine and masculine as, maybe two different polarities of human attributes, right? And not to say that men don't have feminine attributes. They just haven't given themselves permission to be them, right? And to be them publicly and out loud. And so, I say that I design my courses for women and men like them too. And that's really it. I design them for a feminine perspective on the world, which is, a little bit more open minded, right? A little bit more comfortable with ambiguity, certainly more comfortable with expressing, feeling, and expressing emotion, right?
Mhm.
Now, certainly, we also have masculine qualities, and I want to say, like, giving birth, like that's a pretty masculine quality, right? Like we are strong, we're strong, we can be grounded as well, right? So we embody all of those things. But I think one of the things I like to focus on is like where are the positive aspects of being feminine going to work to our advantage? And I think we have a tremendous capacity for listening, for reflecting, for
Yeah.
healing, right? All of those things that the world so desperately needs in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really great point. And yeah, there's so much to be said about that. And we're going to be talking about this more at the conference too, but just that concept of vulnerability that you touched
Yeah.
upon too, with the, I don't know. I don't have all the answers. And there's not a lot of safe spaces right now to be able to do that, to say it, to embrace it, and to just sit with it.
Yeah.
And that's the opposite of the culture we live in right now, right? And the like how much we've immersed ourselves into this capitalistic machine that rewards going faster and competing. And, so it's pretty radical to slow down and say, I don't have all the answers, and just to sit with that
Yeah.
and go slow
Yeah.
and marinate in it. And but that's where some of the most incredible innovation comes from, that's heart-centered, that's human-centered, and that's sustainable.
Yeah.
Because it's really coming from a place of feeling into the collective of what everybody needs in this moment, right? And not force feeding
Absolutely.
it down everyone's throats at some rapid lightning speed.
Yeah. And look, our brains actually function phenomenally at rest. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
we take in so much stimuli all day long, and there's like so much information in there, right? We have, it's like giant supercomputer in our like minds and bodies. But we don't rest long enough to let all of that stuff kind of mix together and to find insight. And I think that's, maybe we can offload some of the cognitive load onto AI, right? So that we don't have to be doing some of the things that don't require highest level brain power, and then let our minds rest. And when they do, they come up with amazing things.
Yeah, exactly. And that that word, like there's words that we play with, right? Like
Mm,
intelligence
yeah.
and technology and tools, right? And I think it's so interesting to look at those words on bigger time scales, right? Because right now those words have very different meaning than they have on the bigger macro time scale of our human species, right? Like the word of technology, like what does that even mean? And from that we have tools that come from the technology, right? So we think about technologies and we think about intelligence even, right? And this is what we're kind of playing with at the conference, and
Yeah,
this idea of ancestral intelligence meets artificial intelligence.
yeah,
What is ancestral, what is in our bones, what is uniquely human
yeah,
about how we navigate this planet, and how we interact with all other life forms on it
yeah,
too, right?
yeah.
And so it's interesting to think about that in the context of artificial intelligence, and to think about um, what intelligent life even is, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
what we are feeding into AI, and the technologies that are computer based and algorithm based are only one form of technology, right? We've had technologies like breath work and
yeah.
community building and somatic release and dance and, singing and storytelling around fires. And these are all very powerful technologies. And in fact, one of the ways that Homo sapiens went to the next level of expanding across the planet was our ability to share really powerful stories.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting to think about in the context of everything we're
Absolutely.
saying.
Absolutely. I've been like doing research on ways of knowing. And there's a international baccalaureate class that talks about 8 different ways of knowing, one of which is imagination. Right. And we often forget that our ability to kind of envision future states that don't exist, our ability to, come up with like creative ideas that synthesize things that we might have gotten little tickles of on earth. Like this is a form of intelligence, right? And
Yeah.
this is how we have evolved, right? Is by being able to imagine something that doesn't exist, test it. I mean, most of the time it's going to be ludicrous and, not discoverable. But possibly it does, right? And being able to take those kinds of risks as a population, I think that that is intelligence. That is a form of intelligence.
Absolutely. And that brings me to another area that I love that you're having the courage to touch on, which is kind of some of the spiritual dimensions that you've touched on in your newsletter. And this is an interesting area, and it's something that we've very cautiously touched on at the conference because spirituality can be a very triggering word to people when you're in, you know, heady professional business or technology circles, right? And I'd love to hear you share a bit about your thoughts around that, just in terms of some of the writing you've been doing is exploring being deeply human, exploring caregiving and grief, and finding God through AI, even. And you've touched on spirituality in ways that are rare in tech circles. So, what do you think? Like, do you think that there's a spiritual dimension to how we're engaging with this
Yeah.
new species of AI? I
Yeah,
mean, what are your thoughts
yeah,
around that?
absolutely, absolutely. I'm not putting it in the species category yet, but I think there's a spiritual dimension to everything, right? I mean, I guess I am someone who just like, you know, woke up as a young child and was like, what does this all mean? Like, I've just have always wanted to know. I've always had a sense of like, there's got to be more than just like the waking up every day and like going through ritual. And so I've had this curiosity about like what is our purpose here and what is this whole life thing all about. And I've explored that in many many different ways, and I've kind of had a love hate relationship with religion. I've like found spirituality through my own exploration into different both like existing practices and things I've just kind of found work for me. But I think for the most part, it's really about acknowledging that we don't know a lot of things, and science is only what we've been able to codify. But as I said before, it's because people were willing to take crazy risks in what they imagined might be possible, right?
Yeah.
And I think if we think about, rather than putting it in the category of religion, or which oftentimes is really just another form of human beings like doing bad human things, right?
Yeah.
And creating justifications for uniqueness and conflict. But if we really think of it as like we are in the pursuit of figuring out what life is, how to create life, right? And we do this through mimesis. And so I think what for me, AI is just another example of human beings trying to simulate what maybe it's like to have simulated us, right?
Yeah.
And discovering, what can we learn from nature, right? What can we learn by observing? What can we learn by the tools that we've made to be able to observe things that are typically unobservable, right? Kind of looking at both the cellular level, which is what my newsletter this week talked about, and microbes, which have a tremendous amount of intelligence, really, as a
Mhm.
single cell organism,
Yeah.
to the scale of the universe, which then, there are embedded patterns in that we are just beginning to understand. So, we've made tremendous leaps over the last century in human knowledge. But I think we can't get too comfortable or cocky, frankly, about science and knowledge, right? A bit of humility about what we don't know, and an openness to discovering and being surprised, right?
Mm,
Surprised by the unknown.
yeah.
To me is what's like, that's the flavor of life, and it makes it exciting. So yeah, I find spirituality in looking at the trees outside of my window. I find it in like looking at a person sitting on a bench next to me. I find it in talking with an AI model.
Yeah, totally. I love that perspective because I think it's something that not everybody's talking about, but a lot of people are feeling is this whole reflection piece. Like you were talking about, how AI acts as a mirror earlier. And, there's just, and because we're also going through a time of such rapid change, right? Like there's a lot of fear in the world, there's a lot of unknown.
Yes.
And with that rapid change, I mean, it kind of pulls the ground out from underneath your feet. And so,
Yeah.
it's interesting to think about spirituality just, I mean, fill in the blank with whatever word people feel comfortable with, but it's a reflection, a time of reflection, a time of, yeah, sitting in that unknown and just pondering.
Yeah.
And so I think that's very real for a lot of people right now. And at the conference next month, that's why that's a theme that we're playing with, because it's something that a lot of people are wrestling with right now. Like, what does our future look like? What does the future look like for my children? What is our purpose here on this
Yeah.
planet? What
Yeah.
are we here to do?
Yeah.
And how do we shape this trajectory that in a way that's, benefits everybody and benefits our future? So,
Yeah. And I love the way that you've brought together ancestral and artificial intelligence, right? Because I think so much is part of, the DNA that's been shaped by years of human beings like
yeah.
doing and exploring and developing rituals. And I'm so excited to both like make music with AI and also hear drums at the same time, right? Like that combination to me is like just fascinating.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Well, so I guess I'll stop on one last question, which is just, I guess, what question would you like to leave the audience with today, just in terms of
Mhm.
a pondering?
Oh, this
Um,
is fun. Well, so I think one of the things that I have recently come to realize, and I think we're all in a state where, certainly people are not happy with the state of the world, right? At a local level, at a global level. And I think this has been a really challenging time, particularly for women. One of the questions I asked in my newsletter day, and I'll put out there is outrage serving you?
mm,
And
wow, that's powerful.
And I'll just leave it at that, because I think that we have a lot to think about there in terms of feeling the feelings that come with being disenfranchised, with being marginalized, with not feeling like we have a voice, but also channeling that into positive, constructive ways that we can impact ourselves in society.
I love that. Well, we'll be hitting on that at the conference. And by the way, for anybody listening, we're going to have a smash room at the conference,
Oh.
which is going to be like mats and foam, and it allows you to like really harness any outrage you have, but then to channel it in a really positive way. So we'll have some intention setting, and we have a labyrinth you can walk through to kind of formulate those intentions for your future and channel all that energy in a really powerful,
I love
constructive way.
I love it.
All
Beautiful.
right. Well, thank you for joining, Lori. It was so nice to have you, and thanks for
Thank
being
you.
here. And for anybody out there, if today's conversation gave you something to think about, please share it with another woman leader who's ready to build with more courage, clarity, and heart. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Remember, the way we shape the future isn't by doing it all alone, it's by leading together. And please follow Lori on LinkedIn. She has a great newsletter and lots of wonderful wisdom to share. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Felicia.